in the vise. Let's just go with nuts in the vise. It's fine.
You're putting your nuts in a vise and it tightens, right? And it's going to hurt. And you know it's going to hurt. But it's not like putting your nuts in a blender.
Fuck me.
Jesus Christ, dude!
Welcome to Turn Extension, a supplemental podcast for the Advanced Maneuvers YouTube channel.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Turn Extension. My name is Devin, also Cutthroat Cure on the forums.
Hey everybody, it's Kevin Dowdark on the forums.
And Jonathan Tyonis on the forums.
Now, Tony couldn't be with us tonight due to a new addition to his family, so we decided to bring the Salt and asked Jonathan to join us again for our topic tonight. We're going to be talking about the proposed changes that recently showed up on the Privateer Press forums concerning SR-17 and our thoughts about that. Now, a little bit of a disclaimer going into this conversation. Everything that we say tonight is just our opinions. It might get a little bit heated. We might go off on some rants. And the information that we have is halfway available. So it's just little tidbits that we've pulled off, comments from Pagani and such. But we're going to, using that information, make a few comments on how we feel that it's going, as well as using some of the information that we received from people that were able to try some of the scenarios at SmogCon.
Well,
So,
and
Kevin.
so I've got a lot of the notes on what was discussed because they actually had a Privateer podcast that kind of hashed over some of the changes, and you know, like Devin was saying, we're kind of at a half point, so it's not even really a half point. We're not even at the start line. The information that we have right now is what we believe will be the start of the community. I don't even remember the acronym.
Integrated development.
Thank you. I just call it the KID every time. It's the information. It's potentially the start point. It may not even be the start point because nothing's official until we see it in paper.
And I think that's really important to, as much as we have visceral reactions, as much as we have knee jerks and thoughts about how this works, this is pre-start. This is theoreticals about what may happen. And then we have to go into the actual CID and test it and try everything. Even if you don't like it, if you look at it and go, this is the stupidest crap I've ever seen, put it on the table.
The reason why we're going to even discuss this, because it's in theory, it's not even in development, hasn't been put in paper, is the fact that a lot of the changes that we're going to discuss are a big departure from what we've been used to for the past year to 2 years, and it's worth talking about. So one of the first things that they were discussing in this proposed 2017 that I want to kind of just get out of the way because it's not a huge issue for most people, is the concept of terrain setup, like where these pre-packaged terrain layouts that we can use. Now from you two, because you guys actually run and organize events and tournaments and stuff like that, is that a good thing, a bad thing, restrictive, the concept of there's these pre-designed terrain setups?
So no, I don't care at all. From what I've gathered, it's actually not a layout, but more of a concept. Excuse me. So you're gonna get, I would assume, like, all right, so we need you to have 8 pieces of terrain for this scenario. We want 1 obstruction in the middle of the board. We want a forest on the left side. We want a hill on the right side. We want 2 walls and an extra forest somewhere in there. Like that probably doesn't add up to 8 because I'm bad at math. But that's what I expect to see. I don't expect to see you put a 3x3 hill here. You put a wall here. You put a building here. I fully expect it to be able to be compatible with a local store's terrain box.
I was expecting more or less. My idea of it was I was expecting for them to go like, "Hey, for this scenario, you need two hills, two forests, one water, two walls, and an obstruction, and that's what you use in this scenario, and then you place it at will."
But then are we going to run into a situation of, if your steamroller packet requires the equivalency of 2 waters per scenario and you get a 16 table, now a store's like, crap, where the hell am I going to get 32 water templates?
Yeah, I expect it to be something much more along the lines of you need 2 things that provide cover, be obstructions or linear obstructions that don't exist anymore, but 2 things that provide cover, 2 things that provide concealment. Much more vague. I wouldn't expect it to be super specific, just for that reason, so that you don't go, where the hell do I get 32 water templates?
So jumping from one of the least discussed proposed changes, we're going to jump to one of the most discussed proposed changes, random game length. So currently right now, the way they're discussing about doing it is that at the end of turn 5, so after the second player finishes their round, the second player rolls a dice, and on a 5-up, the game ends. Like, just terminates. No matter where you are in the game, it just terminates. If you go to 6, again, on a 5-up, it terminates. And if you get to 7, it will terminate. There is no dice roll. So it's a guaranteed 7 rounds, no more, no less. Now, a lot of people are frustrated with this because they either hail us back to an old GW feeling, or they've had actual games where they felt like it could go on to an 8, 9, or 10. Now, Privateer Press came on their defense of, well, most games are pre-decided by 3 or 4, which in many situations I have seen that to be true, but that is not a constant. And I think that a lot of people are concerned about that one experience of, well, I was on 5, but the game ended, and if it had gone to 6, I would have won, and all that stuff. So I can see a lot of frustration happening in the community, but I know a lot of people are trying to come to the defense of, no, this is a non-issue, which has its own issues of, if it's not an issue, why are we even doing it? So what do you guys, from a running events perspective, is this really going to help the community?
No. So the thing about it is, right. So I'm going to try it. I'm going to play it. I'm going to go with it. And that's going to be what it is. But the way I approach it, and the way that I feel it, that the community wants to discuss it, is that the heart of War Machine is playing the game and determining whether you win or you lose. Not in a like competitive or casual or any sort of sense, but you have agency over what happens. You make a dumb move, you get killed on top of turn 2. That sucks. But you were in control of that. It's the same reason we don't like, as a community, the tax into the deployment zone on the top of 1. We don't have any agency over that. And this is the only way in which a game of War Machine will end with 0 player agency. Yes, you might be up, or you might be down at the end of turn 5. But you have seen, well, you being a player, players have seen more than enough games go to a Hail Mary caster assassination with almost nothing left, and then that assassination attempt either fails or succeeds, but they've tried. Simply standing there, rolling a die and going, all right, well, I win because I rolled a 5 or a 6. Seems cool to me, is not how the community wants to exist. The community also doesn't want to exist as, man, I had a shot to win, and I could have won, but then I just rolled a 5, so I don't even get to try. If you fail to clear a zone by 1 model, even if it's like an armor, like a scrap thrall or something stupid, you fail to be able to kill it, and you lose, and you don't feel bad about it. But by putting the die in there and making the die control whether you win or lose the game, it sucks. It's miserable.
And I think the way, and we'll cover scoring in a little bit, but I think the way that they're changing how CPs work in the game is going to potentially cause that 5+ I could have won, but the dice was rolled, to trigger an even more negative response.
Agreed.
So personally, one of the major reasons that I actually left playing GW games was because of the random. I cannot begin to tell you how many times I competed in Ardboy tournaments, got up onto the national level, and then basically knew that if I had literally one extra turn, even though I still had time on the game clock and everything, if I had just had time for one more round, I would have won, hands down. But we rolled, and immediately the game was over. And I felt like I was cheated. Now, that might work for GW games
It
because,
doesn't.
but I'm saying it might work for them. Let's say in some perfect world, it partially works for them. The one thing is that in War Machine and Hordes, something that is a core solution and something that is basically a core concept is caster assassination. And that's something that doesn't exist in GW games, and it's even more of a reason that random turns will not work in this.
And it's especially it's doubling down on something that will be solved by simply removing the die roll and allowing the game to end at 7. If you can't win in the time allotted, that is an acceptable loss. We've had that in Deathclock forever. We will have Deathclock loss. I couldn't do enough in the amount of time provided to win. We've had Assassination loss. I got my caster killed. We've had Scenario lost. I couldn't stop you from scoring enough points. And now we're going to have a position where, and I know this is going deeper than we've already seen, Kevin, but if you get to turn 7 and you're playing through your final turn, and you know you can't push through enough, you at least feel that you're like, I got my shot. I did everything I could within my window, and it wasn't enough. Or I did everything I could in my window, and my opponent outplayed me. With a random die roll, you will always have that point where you're like, man, if I could have just gotten more time, which could have been allowed to me, then I could have had a shot.
Well, and to Devin's point about it working in GW games versus working here, I think it's not necessarily a situation of it works for GW games so much as the community is used to a world where random occurs, because it's not just the one roll of the game, it's random, ability charts and random charge ranges and all that stuff. Random dice roll is an acceptable, maybe not necessarily wanted, but an acceptable experience within 40K. But in War Machine, it's not. We have very few things in the games that have some sort of randomizer to it. Matter of fact, most of the time when they do pop up, they're something that are vented at. I know a lot of people who are like, Gatsby, why can't Gatsby just be a set return? Why does it have to be, D6 or D3 or whatever the case might be? They don't necessarily outspeak to it as much as they are about random game length, but the concept of random in War Machine and Hordes is not something that the community has necessarily been drawn to, and it's in such limited quantities that I think that's really where the kind of the tension that comes from this kind of concept of we're going to introduce random game length is why. We've expressed in the past we don't like random. Why are you doing this to us? Again, I agree with Jonathan. I think that it's something we need to play through. We need to actually we can't just tell PP we don't like random game length. We need to give them evidence, provide them proof that this is not good.
And you can't rant about it. I mean, I'm going off here and I'm yelling at people, right? But you can't rant about it. You have to be eloquent. You have to express your opinions, and you have to be able to back it up with a good, solid argument if that's what you don't like. If you're just going to throw dice at a wall and scream in rage because random turn lengths exist, you're doing it wrong. Play it, roll it, do it, and you'll either end up with, you have 3 outcomes. 1, it doesn't happen. 2, it happens but it doesn't matter. And 3, it super matters. And in 2/3 of the time, it doesn't matter, so who cares? But that 1/3 of the time, really, you need to be able to express why it really sucked.
Yeah, it'll be a sour note, sour experience. And I think that's what most people are concerned about. They're not concerned about the game, the fact that random game length will exist because, 19 out of 20 of their games will end, based off of death clock or assassination or something to that effect. It's that 20th game that they're worried about. They don't want to have that sour experience. And I think that really is the heart of their concern.
I think it's also going to take out a lot of the nail biters. I mean, like literally, I can remember I was actually playing. Darn it, what is his? He plays Kador and he plays Cephalix. Anyways, him and we actually played a game when we were at games and stuff. No, it wasn't Justin. It's man. Anyways, we played a game. I was playing his Crix and he was playing the Coven, and I won the game by caster assassination with 3 seconds on the clock. So it was just there was a turn or two there where we were just going like literally activate, move this a little bit because I was trying to draw him out, and I was trying to basically move things around or get them weakened down. And there was a bunch of turns. Like it's probably the game that I used the most turns, and I think I got up to like 7, I think. But the issue is that had it been in what they're proposing, I would have never gotten to experience that. Because of the possibility that we could have rolled and then the game's done. And that just feels like in a game that's built on climactic endings, probably one of the most anticlimactic things I could expect.
Can we dissect that for a couple seconds? Because I got a thought on it. And it's going to be hard for me to put it out there because I'm not very eloquent at times other than rage.
By the way, it's Eller. Eller.
Eller. Oh, yes. So what happens in this situation is that, and this is why I think it doesn't come up very often in, like, PP mentioned it happened 2 times in a month or what have you of playtesting. So the reason that happens is because you're going to look at the die roll and you're going to try and prevent that die roll as hard as possible. You don't want to lose to a die roll, so you play more aggressively, so you play in a different style. And I think that may not be good, and that may not be a good look at the way the die rolls happen. By merely existing, they are pushing themselves out of existing, if that makes any sense.
Do you think it's actually potential for a playable scenario where somebody who's playing a kind of, I'll say circle, just because they're the ones that pop in my mind when I think of that kind of hit and run guerrilla style. Do you think it could be a scenario where somebody goes through and plays a very cat and mouse avoidy strategy in turn 1 and 2, just trying to position out of alpha strikes and stuff like that, and then goes in on 4, hits hard on 5, and then is actually looking for the pre-termination as a win condition? Or is it so far out that it's not really something you can control?
So you're asking if they're going to Elder them, because that's what the Eldar did in 40K, and it was one of the most aggravating fucking things that happened in that game.
I mean, Signar's got it, tailor-made for them. Gun lines, but Signar also, you sit outside a range, and the first 2 turns are free, right? You don't, as far as we know, the first 2 turns are free. You don't get to score until the second player's second turn. Just like now, we have to make that assumption.
Uh-huh.
Then, so the first 2 turns, you go second as Signar. The opponent goes, I have to close. You get your first turn. Second turn, guns. Third turn, you start to lose points, and then you assault with your army. With their Storm Lances, have everything else shoot, whittle down, and then you take the Storm Lances, you slam them into their chest, and you go, and now I just have to prevent you from getting points for the rest of the game. And it could be 2 turns, a turn.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where a lot of people are like, I don't want to have games that I don't want to have a normal game that terminates prematurely, but I almost wonder if it's a gameable system of I'm playing for the 5-up roll.
Every timeable system is gameable. Period. End of statement. You will never escape it. Look at basketball, look at professional sports of all sorts. There are clock time management issues.
I mean, Death Clock is a thing currently, and there are lists. Let's look at Karchev that play to the fact of good luck. You're going to run out of time because you physically can't do everything you want to, and especially with Karchev, it was slow and it just had a lot of boxes. But you look at something like you said, Signar, or even Circle, you just bounce around, kind of like the Eldar did with their Wave Serpents, basically run in circles because they were faster than everybody. And basically, they either ran your clock down or they basically took 1 point. And once they had that point, all they knew they had to do was keep you from getting 1 point and run it out until you rolled and it was over.
The only thing about Death Clock is that Death Clock is known information. You can look at the clock while your opponent's playing and go, I think he's trying to clock me. You can't look at your opponent and go, I think he's going to roll a 4-up this or 5-up this turn.
Or even that he's playing for that 4-up. You can't look at that and go, man, I think that's what his strategy is, where you can with the clock. I agree. But we need to tie in another thread here, the non-ending control point.
Yes, so with the new Steamroller packet, one of the things that they're talking about doing is that for win conditions, we'll still have Death Clock, like we were saying. You can still lose on clock. You can still lose by caster assassination. However, the game no longer ends on 5 CPs. Their proposed approach is that they want to have the game run its length, and at the end of the game, so not by Death Clock, not by kill points, either by end of the round timer or by the end of turn 5, turn 6, turn 7, the winner is determined by who has the most CPs. So if me and Leclerc are playing and we're going back and forth, and I hit 6 and he hits 9, we're still going if there's still time and still rounds. The what our CPs doesn't matter. The only time it matters is when the mercy rule comes in, and the mercy rule is if at any point in time your opponent has 6 more CP than you, he wins. So in the scenario of I have 9 CPs, he would turn around and be like, okay, cool, well, I have 15, I win.
Yep.
So getting to 5 CPs doesn't terminate a game anymore.
Which is good when you have a set. So you want either one or the other. You want a set number of turns with unlimited CPs, or you want Ps with an unlimited number of turns. The random turn length doesn't help any of that. And I like that at the end of 7 turns, but I am okay with turns. We look at our board and we go, you failed to kill me somehow in 7 turns, and I failed to kill you somehow in 7 turns. What's our CP total? Well, I guess you win because I wasn't able to kill you. Concept, because that's how I felt Mark 1 played. If you didn't win on assassination, you kind of were settling.
Yeah, it almost feels like CP becomes closer to a tiebreaker than an actual win condition.
That's at a 7 round, at a set rounds, that's exactly what it is. It's a tiebreaker.
So it's added to the tiebreakers like AP and all that other, army points and all that surviving models and all that other stuff.
No, but it surpasses all of that clearly because whoever has the most wins.
Correct. Yeah, you would only go to quote unquote true tiebreakers if the players had the exact same amount of CPs. You have 5, I have 5. Okay, let's see who has the most army points killed, or whatever the next tiebreaker is, or whatever the first tiebreaker is. But the fact that at no point in time does the game terminate due to CPs unless you're somehow surmounting your opponent by 6 CPs, it just feels super weird that it almost feels like, and this is just my knee-jerk reaction without ever playing it all, it almost feels like a scenario of lists need to be wrote for assassination more than for attrition. Or attrition leads to assassination, that the playing the CP game really isn't a thing anymore. It's just kind of something you need to keep track of.
Right.
Now, is this something that now let's look at this, and I just noticed something that both of you guys said. So John said it should be one or the other. They don't work well together. And I think that we've definitely, more importantly, with all the erratas we've seen, is that a lot of people have said, hey, the changes to Karchev. You should have changed Karchev, or you should have changed the Mad Dog. And then Una, they said, you could have picked one or the other. Is it something that we see that with any of these changes that they're being a little bit too drastic and that maybe they're pushing it too far?
I was just thinking the exact same thing, that it feels like a double nerf, right? If they're trying to get rid of attrition, not attrition, but like those hardcore, you get one feat and I time walk you for a turn and then I score 5 victory points and win. They want to get rid of that, right? Do 2 things instead of 1.
So, but is that because they're trying to hit it hard, or is it more from the approach of they're coming in and they're going, here's unlimited CPs and here's 7 rounds, and then in play testing, whichever one has the least negative response is the one they keep, and then they get rid of the other one. Like, they're basically playing do you want the prize in the left hand or the prize in the right hand? Choose.
It also makes me wonder if Privateer Press is putting this information out there because they're watching to see what people are more affected by. Like, I mean, I just think it would be cool to see that if they're just putting this information out there, just to see how the community reacts, and then basically which of the two that the community is less pissed off about, that's the one they start leaning towards.
I think they've put themselves in a terrible position. In exactly that, if the company has put out this turn 5 random roll, there is going to be one of 2 situations ID afterwards, in my opinion. The first one is that the community screams, hollers, and gets their way, regardless of right or wrong. They scream, holler, get their way. He is in a position where every time they do something that people don't like, they're going to get just mobbed by crazy people who are intent on removing it from the game. Don't do it. They don't give in to the mass hysteria of the game. Say it is the right thing to do. And people lose faith in the CID completely because they don't see that their voice was heard.
Well, and
I'm worried about that.
There was a discussion that Devin put up on our Facebook page talking about people's reactions to community meta changes and stuff like that just this past week. And one of the comments actually kind of resounded, which was the community as a whole is starting to get these pockets of entitled players where if they scream loud enough, PP will change. Like, that's already becoming a noticeable, right or wrong, visual trend of PP's reaction to thing. And I think the CID is only going to push that entitlement even further.
I took a little bit of offense to that comment just because he called it the millennial effect, and I had to laugh, but then I had to get really upset because I remembered that I fall into that.
You're part of the millennials. Millennial is an attitude; it's not an age bracket. But I agree with you, Leclerc. I think that they kind of have painted themselves in a corner, and I don't know if they're going to be able to come out of this unscathed.
I don't think they will either. But I hope that either the mass group think of in the community realizes, because it's not good, that the 5+ is what they want, give us the turns 5 random. Not 5, but game the 5+ goes away, and they now go, "Oh, I told you."
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm kind of I like your idea of one or the other. Like it's really going to be, and I'm of the opinion of, as much as the CP is not a winnable condition, in the sense or terminating winning condition. I like that more than I like the concept of random game length. But let's talk about scoring a little bit, because we've mentioned that Mercy basically says you can't win unless you go 6 up, and obviously if we're not doing 5 points, then there's no threshold to the point values. How does scoring work? So a couple things came out of the Privateer Press podcast, one of which was objectives are being trimmed up. They're still only going to award you 1 point, but now objectives in 2017 are just going to be a single ability. So it's not the current objectives where it's you get these like double stack abilities that have effect, like you get cover and the ability to sack pawn off the thing. It's going to be a single ability. They still are models, so they still will contest zones. So for the most part, objectives haven't been changed, except for the fact it's just down to 1 ability. The big thing that changed, and I'm still kind of torn on this. I know what they're trying to do. It's like I see what they're trying to do. I don't necessarily agree what they're doing, but they've basically determined that scoring on flags, circles, rectangles, whatever the case is going to be determined by a model type and not any model.
I think my friend John from Scotland actually said it best, because he actually saw the scenarios in play at SmogCon. He called it the Green Lantern, because he said that you had this basically the shape within another shape, and you had like he said it reminded him of like the Green Lantern, which I thought was funny. And he said that one of his biggest issues was that he still was seeing lists that were playing the same. The only difference is that they had the Warcaster or War Noun that was just like straddling the 2 zones.
Yeah, Warcasters are going to be a big player in your CP games during the game, which in my opinion is kind of cool, because it really kind of puts a situation of, and we've talked about this before, Devin, on podcasts, of that concept of risk versus reward, where gaining CPs is going to be another risk versus reward scenario. Casters are able to score on anything, and the concept of domination is gone. And by gone, I mean there's not going to be a stickler for controlling 1, dominating 2. It's just if a caster scores, it's 2 CPs. So
are you sure about that?
That was off of the Privateer podcast.
It's legit.
So the flags in a scenario can only be scored by a caster. The circle zones can be scored by warrior models, so that's your casters, your infantry, solos, anything like that. The big thing that I think it was Hungerford said was the concept of you need to be over half in order to score is gone. He said it was kind of this unneeded accounting that you had to figure out. Is basically if you have a unit in a zone, it scores. But it has to be it must be within the zone. So it can't be a scenario of you have 4 of the unit inside and one of the guys is kind of like just hugging over the lip. Everybody has to be within for the unit to score, which is probably why they
completely within.
So actually, no, that's right. You could toe in and still score. But that's probably why they use the circle instead of the rectangle, because there's a larger footprint for units. And then rectangles can only be scored by jacks, beasts, and battle engines, and then of course the caster. Is it wrong of me to think that this is weird where I feel like they're trying to do it in the sense of they're trying to make you take all-comer lists. We'll call them all-comer lists. They're trying to take this kind of balanced scenario where it's not all jacks or all infantry. It's a plethora of things so that you can score. That feels like what they're trying to do, but it feels like this unneeded confirmation of, do you have the right thing in the right spot? Like I have a beast in my rectangle, oh no, I can't score with that because it's the wrong model.
I just think that something I think we're going to see a lot of with this is that we're going to see casters like Terminus really become prominent because, especially when you're thinking about, oh, well, I need a Warjack, or oh, I need a troop choice. Having something like Terminus that can basically sit here and say, come along, little bitches, come get me, and basically survive through it, they're going to be very strong, especially since they can score basically anywhere.
So I want to take a step back, and I want to look at the scenario in 2017. We've been told that Recon in its current state survives to 2017. That means we have 2 flags on the outside, rectangle zone on the inside. We have no circular zone. Leads me to believe that you will not need balanced lists. And maybe I'm stupid. Well, I'm sorry. I'm stupid. But maybe this is, but I look at it and go, all right, well, you take 1 troop list, and then you have 1 skew list, because you can look at a scenario like Recon and go, gotcha.
I almost feel like Recon was a tester in 2016 because they knew this is the direction that they were going in 2017, and they wanted to see what happened in a scenario where not only, because most of the scenarios beforehand was you either scored on flags or you scored in a zone, or maybe there's some scenarios where you score in a zone and flags, or zones and objectives. Recon was the first one where 3 scoring elements, flag, zones, and objectives, were in play. From my knowledge, I'm almost certain. And I think that this is that was kind of their test bed for how does the community react to this plethora of scoring potentials. But even in Recon, like you said, there's only a rectangle. There's only 1 zone type to it. What if they end up releasing a scenario packet that's like, we're going to put a circle zone in the center, and it's going to be flanked by 2 landscape rectangle zones, and in the rectangle zones there's 2 objectives, and then there's like, what if I'm going to go crazy here, and we're going to throw, then there's flags on either side of the circle, and you're like, Jesus fucking Christ, I have so many scoring potentials, but only if I wrote my list that way.
You just described what Devin was talking about. I mean, I saw the picture of the game, and it was legitimately, I couldn't see any of the flags or but it was legitimately dead center of the board, landscape rectangular zones touching the edges of the circle along exactly what's going to happen.
But even in that scenario, that begs to ask, all right, I've got rectangles, I've got circles, I've got flags, like shit. Like they've already confirmed that anything can contest. So you throw in a unit into a rectangle zone that can only be scored by War Beast. You're not going to be able to score, true, but you still contest. So you have the potential. Rectangles are for War Beast. Units would contest a rectangle zone, not score.
Oh no, I'm sorry. No, my concept was what I meant to try to indicate was you don't do that with troops of a colossal into a troop zone and go, come at me, bro.
Yeah, you're not getting these points. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200.
While the colossal is still contesting and scoring the other zone.
Oh yeah, because it's not completely within. It's within, so it could side saddle the rectangle while being in the circle. Oh Jesus!
And if your flag is close enough, you could just contest that dude too.
So we're potentially looking at a scenario. If there ever is a scenario where a flag is in a zone, a caster gets to butt up to the flag in the zone and just starts collecting 4 CPs or 2 CPs or whatever it boils down to. There's nothing preventing a caster from being like, I'm going to sit in this nook between this rectangle zone and this circle zone and fuck off.
Yeah, and that's, I don't think I think it needs testing. I think we need to look at it and analyze it. But I don't think that's inherently bad when the game doesn't end.
Correct. It doesn't end on
The
CPs.
option to do the same thing. You can just be on the other side of the board going, all right, well, I put my butt crack in right across from you, and now we're even.
So if this is a case where zones and flags and everything can be contested and controlled, and you can just start racking up points like, oh, I end my turn, I get 6 CPs, you get 4 CPs, what the fuck? But if that's a world that we're about to live in, then the concept of game state end on 5 CPs can't be a change that is adopted into the packet, or they have to rewrite the whole packet.
I 100% believe that they will not end on 5 CPs, period. It is not a concept they're willing to entertain, and I think that's fine.
All I'm seeing in my future is Colossal sales are going to fucking skyrocket.
Well, I mean, for the aesthetic of the game, it's people always get drawn to tables when big things are on it, so maybe that's good for the community, and I'm sure PP's probably hoping that. Or PP comes up with a rule that says Colossals can't score, and then we're like, motherfucker!
Then they go straight into the bonfire.
I'm going to start burning my army on YouTube.
Shit, I'm just going to be sitting there with marshmallows going, I fucking told you. I fucking told you.
But, so what I think, and have we gotten through all the juicy bits, Kev?
No, there's some about the actual tournament formats.
Well, I haven't
what's that?
listened to the Primecast. I haven't had any options, so please elucidate.
Oh, so the tournament formats are changing. Sort of, kind of, not really. Steamroller and Champions format will still exist. Obviously, all the changes that we talked about will be in place for Steamroller and for Champions. Clocks, Death Clock is now the standard. Time turns is now the variant, which isn't really a change for the community. Finally. Because the community's just been doing that. It's just PP made it legit now.
Nobody gives a shit about time turns.
Well, it still pops up every once in a while. There was a time turns event at Las Vegas Open.
Andy Podell loved time turns, and that was because he knew his army like the back of his hand, and he made you his bitch. Andy Podell could literally start his clock, move his entire army, and then take the rest of the 6 minutes that he has to explain exactly how he's about to fuck your army.
So this model's going to bend this one over. The other thing, and I'm going to sprinkle this with a little bit of salt because I believe I found this note in the forums, but so I'm going to consider this uncontested because I don't think this came from a PPS title. Is that Killbox is 10 inches now, not 14. So that will kind of play into that whole, well, now I can play a little further back. I'm not putting my caster at threat. So, but from the format changes, Iron Gauntlet as a format is gone. Basically what they're doing is Iron Gauntlet is being morphed into something called the Iron Gauntlet Tournament Circuit. And the way this works is PP is going to basically, for any PP official approved Masters or Champions event, so let's rehash that again, PP officially approved, so they have to sign off on it for it to count, Masters or Champions events. The people who score first, second, and third will get points. If you do not get first, second, or thirds, you get dick for points. Score points. At the end of the year, when we go to the Las Vegas Open, there will be basically a point requirement in order to get an invitation.
You mean lock and load? Lock and load.
Lock and load. I'm sorry, what did I say?
Las Vegas
Open.
Oh, sorry. Wishful thinking. I wanted to go bet. So when Las Vegas Open occurs, if you have reached the point...
Lock and load. Lock and load.
Jesus Christ. That tournament...
What about the Las Vegas Open?
That tournament that PP runs.
The LVO, right?
I hate you so much, Leclerc.
The one in Seattle.
It's totally warranted.
The scored point requirement, and they didn't release what the point requirement is. It could be 35 points. It could be 120 points. Who knows? But if you reach the scored point requirement, you will get an invitation to participate in the Iron Gauntlet Championships at Lock and Load. Here's the kicker, and this is the thing I did not like, is the Iron Gauntlet Championships. 1 year will be a Masters champion. The next year it will be a Champions Championship, and it will keep flipping around every other year.
I like that. That's good.
Basically, what you're telling me is that Tom Wan is basically going to max out points within a week or two, and then everybody's just got to catch up.
I think he's just going to get a golden ticket from Privateer Press. Like, he's just going to get it. So the big thing that they wanted to point out with this is that because there's this kind of like point value you have to achieve, no longer do people have to worry about, oh, well, you know, I was bumped out of one of the 1632 slots because so-and-so got more points than me and bumped me out. If you reach the point value, you get an invitation. That you can't be
That's
bumped
going to
out.
do something really cool, though, and I have to applaud this. If there is anything that is going to push competitive players into going more events, it's going to be that. Like, you're going to not just see somebody showing up at X, Y, and Z and basically playing the ones they know. You're going to see them trying to get as many points, and that could be, you know, taking third, taking second, you know, just playing as much as they can in order to get there. And it kind of gives the underdog a little bit more of a chance because you don't exactly have to be the best. You just have to score well enough to get enough points to get there.
So one of the things that I noticed about this was the fact that Iron Gauntlet as a format is going away, and they're basically just going to be reaping. Let's see what I did there, Grimkin, reaping. They're going to be reaping the points from Masters and Championship scorings, and that means
And what they sow.
for what one of the complaints that I've heard from people who travel to lots of cons and they're always trying to participate with all of the big players and stuff like that is there are many conventions that kind of struggle with shit. People want to play in Masters and want to play in Iron Gauntlet, but they can't because schedulings and the heats lay over top of each other. So you get these people who are like, well, I'm going to participate in Heat 1, and if I lose the top, then I'll drop out of that, and I'll jump into Iron Gauntlet real quickly, or vice versa, and all that stuff. So now you don't necessarily have this format competition because the Iron Gauntlet tournament circuit is pulling from your Masters and your champions. So really the only ones that you have to make sure are parallel of each other is Masters and Champions, because you'll probably have people that want to be in both. So is that a good thing?
So what it does, and this is really, really cool, thinking about how this interacts as a convention organizer with my schedule. I have one less event that I need to force deep into that schedule that is required, that requires finagling and building around and trying to get there. You have to have the Masters, team tournament. You have to have the Iron Gauntlet. You have to have the Champions. These things have hard to fit all your stuff in. By removing the Iron Gauntlet as a individual event, because it had lost all particular meaning as an individual event when they went to 50-point lists and no 75 points and stuff like that. It gives me more flexibility to fit in 3 days worth of tournaments.
Well, and from the player's perspective, it actually changes up the Shark Tank. Because as an example, I remember going to Gen Con and I was in a Masters Heat, and I knew I wasn't necessarily playing I had a tank of sharks, but it was not a full tank of sharks because some of the sharks were playing in the other tank that was called Iron Gauntlet. If Iron Gauntlet's away and the only way the competitive players are scoring points is in the Masters, then when I jump into Masters, I'm jumping into a full tank of all sharks.
So is that a good thing or a bad thing? I'm trying to see where you're...
From a competitive perspective, I think it's a good thing because it's guaranteeing that you're getting the best of the best in first, second, and third, and people aren't getting into first, second, and third merely because there weren't sharks there to eat them or there weren't bigger sharks there to eat them.
So you're not looking for a chance heat, you're looking for an actual challenge.
Correct.
Well, you're not going clubbing seals.
Yes, yeah. You're going to, when you go into a Masters event at a convention, you're going to have to fight all the way. There's no cupcake rounds in round 1 or round 2. There may
You're
be
gonna
a
have to
cupcake
Chris
round.
Davies it. You're gonna have to Chris Davies it.
You're going to have to go, Chris. But I think it really provides a real, like, I legitimately feel like the title Masters has earned its place again.
That's fair. I like it. I didn't. It's going to be a lot of work for a lot of conventions come July.
Yeah,
But,
and maybe that's why PP was announcing some of that information on their last Privateer podcast was, let's get the word out there so our convention organizers are aware of what's going on and can start doing whatever they need to.
Panicking.
Yes, because they can start panicking.
So that's cool. I want to go back because when I asked you if we were done with any tidbits, I had a specific thing on my mind. The thought I had was, for the first time, Privateer Press is addressing the meta through, okay? Before, they've tried to address the meta, when we had high defense infantry, they were addressing the meta through model releases. When we had high armor, through model releases, or through nerfs, through buffs, through different changes. This is the first time, I think, that they have taken a look at the meta and gone, this is not a game that we can fix forever with new releases. Magic, when Type 2 came about, standard, whatever you want to call it for us old timers, when Type 2 came about, it was because they couldn't just release fixes forever. And Privateer Press is sitting in the same position. They can't just release fixes forever. They have to create an environment, a metagame within the greater metagame. Oh, okay. I have to bring X, Y, and Z in order to address the core facets of the game as support.
So, a term was used that I had never associated with Privateer Press with all the erratas. And with all the erratas and stuff like that. And that was Privateer Press's game, War Machine and Hordes, is now a living rule game. Which, for competitive, is probably great. For casual, can be super confusing.
I disagree on a number of accounts. Okay, so the first tick in that box generally is considered the dynamic updates. People, I believe, are expecting these to come out way more often than they are going to come out. They're going to address things that are like unforgivable, and we need to just get them out of the way. So unless something peeks its head up, there's not going to be a whole lot of them.
So what do we call what Haley is doing? Because she's been peeking that fucking head up for quite a while.
There will always be good casters, and there should always be good casters, and there should be ball-busting casters. But there should not be casters that everybody has to plan everything around. And what they said with Una was really telling, in my opinion, because they said you had to build a specific list to deal with her. They don't want that. Fighting against Haley is like putting your nuts in a vice. But it doesn't matter what nuts you have and how tight the vice is. They're gonna be there.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say putting my nuts in a vice is something I would equate to a bad experience.
Yes, I agree. It's a bad experience. But, I mean, all right, so maybe I went a little far. Maybe you're just putting like your toes in a vice.
Nope, nuts in the vice. Let's just go with nuts in the vice. It's fine.
You're putting your nuts in a vice, and it tightens, right? And it's going to hurt, and you know it's going to hurt. But it's not like putting your nuts in a blender.
Fuck me.
Jesus Christ, dude!
Which I think is what they want to prevent.
I would definitely say that I can see the comparison to Haley being nuts in a vice, and Una or Tuna in her previous incarnation being nuts in a blender. I can see it.
All those bird beaks are the blades. Anyways, now that we derailed that logical thought.
I had a perfectly logical thought there. So I don't think dynamic updates are going to happen as often as people think they are. I don't think the errata is going to change as much as often as it has with the release of Scorn and the first two in the season. And I don't think that the Steamroller packet itself, changing on a yearly basis like it has for like 7 years, is going to turn it into a living rules game. It is going to be a solid game, provided all these other things balance out. But they're I don't think they're trying to turn it into a living rules game by any shot of the imagination.
So I think in the end, it's really going to boil down to we're not going to know until we play it. That's the whole reason for the kid in the first place, is that we need to go through these changes. We need to adjust to it. I don't think anybody can start raising pitchforks and claiming living rules game destroyed my game, or no CPs makes it impossible for me to win, or anything like that. We legitimately, through all of our gripes and complaints, need to just sit down and play the game through, or play the rules through the kid, provide our feedback. And when I say provide our feedback, I don't mean write privateer press with a single sentence that says, you suck, I'm calling the trade commission, blah, blah, blah. You need to give detailed information. I played X number of games. In half of the games, this was always a repeated encounter because of the rules, and give them that kind of feedback so that they can make change. You send them a little one-liner, I promise you they will ignore it.
I'm going to go so far as to say that you won't be able to give that one-liner. I'm pretty sure they're going to be very stringent on how they accept feedback.
I know when we did the beta testing for SR16, and we did the beta testing for when we were doing that, we had to be super specific. And Mayor Pandas, we had to be very specific about everything we were putting in there, because just because you got into one level of the test didn't mean that you got into all levels of the test. So, luckily my group and I were, we were specific enough that we made it into all of them. But I do know that there were some people that kind of wanted to catch, quick information, and they would be like, "Oh, this worked, this didn't," and they didn't stay in the beta long. So, I mean, I definitely think that if they're going to do this, the more detailed you are and the more specific, the better it's going to become, because of the fact that you're actually providing valuable information, and they want to keep those tools close to the heart.
And I think that's true for the whole of the CID, for the rest of Privateer's existence. Doing this experiment, be good, be thorough, be specific.
So with that, I'd like to turn it to the community. With all the discussions that we've had today, or with any readings that you have done, what's the one thing that you're actually looking forward to playtesting in the CID? And what's the one thing that you're the most concerned about going into the CID? So with that, I'd like to take a time to thank LeClaire for joining us today and having this discussion with us.
Anytime, bro.
And have a good night, everybody.
See you, people.
Good night.